This is OTR FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Welcome to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's live streaming interview series, where leading new thought teachers, speakers, and authors share the intimate stories behind the 10 best spiritual books that inspired them the most on their spiritual journey. From well-known classics to hidden gems you might never have heard of, the No BS Spiritual Book Club saves you time and money by sharing reliable recommendations from those who've walked the path before you. The No BS Spiritual Book Club, the only no BS guide to the best spiritual books to inspire your own journey of self-discovery. Here's your host, founder of the No BS Spiritual Book Club, Sandy Sedgbeer.
Hello and welcome. Before I introduce this week's guest, I just want to share that if you're struggling with making important decisions, there's a book I highly recommend called The Necktie and the Jaguar by retired clinical psychologist, Jungian analyst, and shamanic practitioner Carl Greer, in which he shares how he tapped into the wisdom and power of unseen worlds for guidance and inspiration. It's a truly fascinating memoir that offers some valuable keys and questions that inspire the kind of thinking that guides you effortlessly on your own path to transformation. And you can check it out for yourself at carlgreer.com. And now, joining me today to share the stories behind the 10 books that influenced him the most on his life journey is maverick deep ecologist, spiritual coach, shamanic guide, and the founder of Sacred Earth Network, Bill Pfeiffer, also known, preferably known as Sky Otter. And Sky Otter has dedicated his life to building an earth-honouring culture. He has 25 years of experience in re-evaluation counseling and Vipassana meditation. He's undergone extensive training with Siberian shamans, and he's partnered with and designed experiential workshops with people such as Joanna Macy, John Perkins, Lynn Roberts, Kathy Pedilano, and John Seed. And he's also the author of a highly acclaimed book called Wild Earth, Wild Soul, a Manual for an Ecstatic Culture. Bill, Sky Otter, welcome.
Pleasure to be here, as always. Not this particular show, but it's great to be speaking with you again.
You too. It's hard to not call you Bill. Hard to remember to call you Sky, so I might switch back and forth. Hope you don't mind.
I don't mind at all.
Good. So tell us why you say books are a mind meld.
That's a great question. To me, whenever I read a book and I'm liking that book, the author's mind is melding with mine, and it's not only intellectual per se or the symbols, it's an energetic transmission, and we know what that means. You're just this person's, especially if they've spent years on a book, their heart and soul comes through, and you're touched. If they're sincere and authentic authors and all these 10 books are top shelf, that's going to come through.
Isn't it interesting how we know authenticity when we see it, and we don't know why we know or how we know, but we do know it.
Yeah. It's been kind of a behind the scenes central discussion in my entire adult life, and really it's been kind of coming up more and more. And when I was 21, some sweet person who was kind of a mentor and a friend said, "You're real, Bill, you're real." And it was like, that felt really good. And I've wanted to be real ever since,
Yeah. And life does its best not to make us real. It wants to mold us, shape us, and help us conform to other ways of being than ourselves. So yeah, it's really nice to meet real deal people.
Yeah. Here we are.
So here we are. So tell me, what was it like for you to have to go back all those years over your life and pick just 10 books that you thought really guided you along the way?
Well, I think I said in the written kind of the written version, or the summary of this interview, is simply that those 10 books just jumped off the shelves. I didn't really think about it. I didn't spend a lot of time. It wasn't a logical process. I have a bookcase right here and in the other room, and I just started looking. And then there were a couple that I went almost, and then they just chose themselves. And I think that the other thing is that the reason that they were easier to choose is that I have a thesis that we'll probably get into later on in the discussion, which is there's a lot of spiritual language out there, and it's all good and it's beautiful and it's like different paths up the mountain. But my thing is earth honoring culture. I want us to honor nature, really honor it, not pay lip service to her. And so I'd say 6 of the 10, that's the central theme.
Okay, well, let's start with your books, and later on you can start telling us how you became interested in honouring nature. So book number 1, unsurprisingly, Touching the Jaguar, Transforming Fear into Action to Change Your Life and the World by former economist and advisor to the World Bank and governments turned activist John Perkins.
Yeah, well, I'm real glad to start with that one because John is a mentor and a friend, and it's funny in the very opening you mentioned who I don't know, a guy named Carl Greer, and the Jaguar popped up, and two of the books on my list have Jaguar in them. I did not think that through, and when I did a series of shamanic trainings with different people in North America, in Siberia, and with John, who is bringing back the Amazonian and Andean tradition with him, and he did a brilliant job of that energy transmission. But this time it was in person, and in the book, he the Jaguar courage and spirit, and the main theme throughout the book is we need to move through our fears for a better world for our children. And I think one of the things that I admire about John, and that comes through loud and clear in the book, which was quite unusual, is he's not afraid to get into the political sphere. And that's a rough game, a really rough game. And he's been in there for a long time. And I don't know if I said it in my little short review, but he felt in that book, he felt like he did in Confessions of an Economic Hitman, that he had some amends to make, some big amends, that he felt like he really was on the wrong side of history. And then he did this truthfully quite revolutionary switch with his life. And I'll always be grateful for him, because he's a man of courage, truly. And to this day, he doesn't let up. He's like 75 or something, and he's just.
It takes a lot of courage, doesn't it? I mean, he was working at the highest level, World Banks, Fortune 500 companies. And I think I read a description that, he was, when he was an economic hitman, he was convincing developing countries to build huge infrastructure projects that put them perpetually in debt to the World Bank and other US controlled institutions. And at first he sincerely believed he was, this was the best model for economic development. But then he came to realize it was really a new form of colonialism. And I mean, to turn your back on all of that at that level, and say, I'm not doing this. It takes a lot of balls. It really does.
And with a daughter. So, but the thing that he has told me personally, and I think it comes through once or twice in the book, is that he wanted his daughter to know that he was authentic and that he was committed to his principles above all. And so he had to make this switch, this revolutionary transformation in his life, or else he has to live with himself ultimately. But I just think with the daughter aspect, that it's tremendous courage.
Yeah. I mean, one of the great gifts of kids, isn't it, is that they keep us real. And we will do things for them that we wouldn't consider doing otherwise for anyone else. Yeah. Tell me, you talk about the Jaguar. What does touching the Jaguar mean?
Well, moving through fear, having the courage to move through fear. But the way that I suspect Greer means it, the way that John means it, the way that I mean it, the way that I understand the Amazonian shamans mean it, is that there's a fierce, uncompromising instinctual, primal way of knowing reality that we all have inside of us. And it's that primal knowing, which, as you were touching on before, about how it's been kind of drilled out of us or trained out of us. We've been domesticated. So coming back, the Jaguar is beckoning us to come back into our wild nature. And I mean, I get the shivers just talking about what the Jaguar spirit, the animal and the spirit, really means.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I got chills when I read one of John Perkins' books, and I don't remember which one. It may well have been the economic. It's certainly, he told his story, and I was just blown away, you know, at his courage, and thought, I want to meet that man. You know, love those stories. Okay, so let's move on to number 2, which is a perennial classic, Power of Now, a guide to spiritual enlightenment, Eckhart Tolle.
Well, I didn't describe the book because I said it was probably the best book I ever read, and it wasn't a book for reading. it was a book for experiencing, and you know, Eckhart is consistently reminding us, and these are my words, is that source energy, infinite intelligence, he would say, you know, or not quite, but the ground of being is right here and right now. And that we're fooling ourselves to think otherwise. This is it. It's always now. I just think that's hilarious because our minds are constantly future or past oriented, and then he just comes along and kind of like bops everybody on the head like a Zen master.
Yeah, we're all trying to escape the now all the time, aren't we?
Aren't we?
Yeah. Number 3, Black Elk Speaks, being the life story of a holy man of the Oglala Sioux by John Neil Hart. Tell me more about this one.
Wow. Every time you mention a book, I get a small version of that big energetic transmission. I think that there's so many ways to go about talking about that book, but I think the best way to start is simply that it's arguable, but let's say along with the Apaches, the Lakota Sioux were the fiercest, put up the fiercest resistance against the U.S. Army. And they were not gonna, they were gonna do everything to maintain their wildness and their way of life. And yet they were physically overpowered and starved. And so, and diseased and so forth. And Black Elk comes along and he goes to the mountaintop and he has a vision not only of his people, and if I break down crying in this interview, you'll understand why, because I'm so moved. I mean, he and his people are up against everything. He goes up on the mountain. He has a vision that is not only for his people, but it's for humanity, and it goes way into the future in terms of, you could call it the reconciling force of the races coming together, of people living in harmony again with the earth. And and also, and this might be the most important thing I say on this interview, is actually understanding what the spirit world is, the unseen world behind the scene world. And so he does such a good job in that book of putting that front and center as a way that, you know, we're talking about spiritual books here, as a way to move through humanity's impasse or adolescent phase, we could call it. And just brilliant. And I think one of the themes that we're touching on is not just authenticity, but courage, and unbelievable courage. Unbelievable.
Yeah. And this from a man who was probably perceived, by the soldiers, the Western people, as somebody who was unintelligent and, just so backward.
Yeah, like backwards and nuts. And that's the way we've been brought up, is that everybody who doesn't subscribe to, let's call it like the white colonial program, is we're we're primitive and savage.
Yeah. Wow. There's been so much truth that's been shared over the years and then buried. I can see that this book is a very moving book and one that's very poignant for you. Do you remember when you read it, what you were doing, how it impacted you, the change that it shifted in you?
After I had that mystical experience at 26 years old, which I think we touched on in our last conversation, but I'm not sure. It's on my bio. I do a write-up on what happened to me at 26. I went through a period of what I would call kind of classic peace and then environmentalism, peace work, environmental, sort of I would call it kind of a mainstream approach. And I'm proud of it, and I'm really happy about it. And as soon as I got out to both the Southwest and Siberia, which was happening, I was kind of, for all sorts of reasons, going back and forth. I just, I felt firsthand, like never before, that that indigenous wisdom and the indigenous worldview were paramount and central to, again, humanity's impasse, or our evolutionary struggle, if you will. Actually, a good way to talk about it is the birth of humanity. Like, I sense that we're giving birth to something greater. I really feel that. I don't feel like we're just going down the tube, but it's a painful birth. And so the indigenous worldview and prophecies take that very much into account. And so when I read his vision, it was a complete validation of all these kind of like mini peak earth shamanic experience. That's the best way to say it. These shamanic experiences of the natural world, backed up by the indigenous ancestors. So he was like confirming all of that.
Were you moving in this direction before then? Before this experience at 26?
So my mom and dad got divorced when I was 5 years old. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. My dad lived 40 miles outside of the city, which back then, 40 miles outside of the city was actually the country. And we both, where he lived and within 50 miles of where he lived, there were arrowheads all over the place. And I would pick those up, Sandy, and I was like, whoa, there was something really seriously good, cool, different going on here besides what I've been taught. Like, I felt their spirit at that time. But these were momentary childhood experiences that didn't have any bite, so to speak. And then it's completely built up steam more and more and more. In fact, last night we had a sweat lodge ceremony here, the first one on this land. And it's just, for my money, this remembering our indigenous soul is it's a beautiful homecoming, and you can be a Jew and a Catholic and a Buddhist, and that doesn't keep you from knowing your indigenous soul, or an atheist.
Yeah. Our next book, I'm going to move on, is Return to Love, Reflections on the Principles of A Course in Miracles by Marianne Williamson, which is a beautiful, beautiful book, published in 1992.
It's funny too. It's funny. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love Marianne. I've met her once. I went to a lot of her talks. Speaking of authentic, she's the real deal, and she's in service to humanity, and she figured it out. She got it. She was absolutely miserable, and God is love, and love spoke with her very, very clearly, and basically said, "Get off your self-centered ass." and she listened, and I just love her. In that book, I love the combination of like her own humanness and neuroses, along with these just tremendous spiritual insights into what it means just to live in this crazy culture.
Yeah. You said that the book helped me take the high road in the aftermath of a painful divorce.
Yes, it did. I think in life, we always have this choice. We get to, when the pain is acute, when the pain is really acute, we can go into deep fear and blame mode, and hang on and wish it could be different, and want to make, in this case, our partner all wrong, and there are other parts of life dozens besides a divorce. But I think we're talking about the 10 best spiritual books here. So spirituality is about choosing the high road. It's choosing love. It's choosing decency, virtue, respect, and connection. And there's a little faith element there. There's this faith that somehow we're going to get through this. That little voice inside says, "This is not going to be it's not going to be your last marriage." I'm laughing because I've had two. And this is not going to be your last marriage. It's not going to be your last relationship. So, get over yourself and move into higher ground. And that's what happened to me. And it was not easy, Sandy. I was miserable and scared for about a year, but I definitely, in reading the book, I was guided to move out of that misery.
Yeah. One of the things that I remember from that book was when she said that relationships are where we meet ourselves. And that stopped me in my tracks. I really had to think about. Yeah.
I think I've said this to you before, publicly and privately. I love your questions and what you bring out in your in your interviewee, and that, for my money, Sandy, like at 65 years old, I told you in the last show, I do mushroom ceremonies, and I do all this crazy stuff, sweat lodge ceremonies, vision quests, taking people to Siberia. But the best medicine is an intimate relationship with one other person that you love. It's the best, and it can be the bitterest medicine, but boy, do we ever grow. And I think everybody who's listening to this knows that it's true. Like, we just, we don't know why, but they are our mirrors, and they show us all of our little weak spots, and they also conversely bring out our greatest love and passion if we're willing to put that on the table.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Talking of mushrooms, book number 5, Plants of the Gods, Their Sacred Healing and Hallucinogenic Powers by Richard Evans.
Schultes.
Schultes.
Yeah.
Albert Hoffman and Christian Ratch.
I don't know him. Yeah,
You
I
don't
know
know him.
the first two.
Yeah, well, he was the one that wrote the original of, this book that you'd listed was published in 2001, but he had written a book in 1979, and he joined forces with these two gigantic, eminent researchers to publish it again, because now they had a lot of the research. One of them was an anthropologist, and actually, he was the anthropologist and ethnopharmacologist, and the others were able to help with all of the latest research on psychoactive flora.
So you're talking about Latch here.
I'm talking about yes, I am talking about Latch. Yeah,
Okay,
he was the one. He was the one that wrote the original.
Because you just taught me something. I didn't know the first thing about him whatsoever. I just learned about and focused on those two luminaries, Hoffman and Schultes, and so thank you for that.
So tell us about the book. Tell us about the mushrooms.
I said to you earlier in written form, where would we be without the plants, and where would we be without the psychoactive plants? So another theme of this conversation is humanity's impasse, our tremendous need for collective transformation, and the plants, particularly the psychoactive plants, are elder teachers, and if we have the courage and we're willing to do so responsibly with the proper set and setting with people of integrity, we can going back to our previous conversation, we can do 10 years of personal growth in a few hours. I after my experiences with them recreationally in my late teens and early 20s, I was frankly just scared of them. Like, I didn't want to, they just were too intense for me. And then about 10, 12 years ago, they came back in my experience as in a responsible way. And it's been this very gradual process of thanking Mother Earth and the Great Spirit like never before. Like, they're constantly giving us these gifts if we're just willing to receive them. And that book is the most, I guess you could call it the most comprehensive or exhaustive in terms of lining it all up, explaining what they are: peyote, San Pedro, the big ones, ayahuasca, psilocybin, and so forth, and saying what they are, and also, and I think this is for anybody and everybody, to know where the safe limits are. Like, just like, for some people, Iboga from Africa, they can handle that. I'm not touching it. And Datura, forget it. It can kill you. So I think that book makes it condenses all this information so we can say, okay, I'm willing to go there, but not there.
Yeah. And, we know there's so much research being done right now with psychoactives and depression, anxiety, all kinds of things. And it's astonishing, some of the results of it. But at the same time, lots and lots of people are doing ayahuasca ceremonies because it seems to be quite fashionable. And in some cases, I think, well, who can say? I don't know, so I can't judge. But it does help to have a book that tells you what is safe, what isn't safe, and everything you need to know about them.
Yeah, I mean, safe is a relative term. I mean, life is a risk. Everything we do is a risk, especially getting in our automobiles. And so we've been taking calculated risks. That's one of the reasons why we're alive and happy. And I'm talking about you and me. And so I've had very powerful experiences with ayahuasca, but I would approach with extreme caution and feel safe about the set and setting, and do your research. Really do your research. Because Sandy, more and more people are doing it, and that's become sort of one of South America's, the Amazon's, money makers. So if it's gonna be, and we're not gonna stop it, if it's gonna be, then we hope that it's done again with the most integrity, and that people who research it do so well. Do a good job of researching who and where, etc.
You did say in your write-up that this book is where ethnobotany meets magic. It's your Bible for this partnership dance, not use, dance with, rather than use of these soul development accelerators. Great description. Tell me what you mean by dance with. You see this as a co-creative
Yes,
process?
very, yes, exactly. That life wants to create more life. Life wants creativity. So creativity and life are kind of two parts of the same momentum and spirit. And so it takes, so that there's the flesh, the human flesh, and there's the plants and the fungi, which are an entirely different kingdom. When you ask me about Blackout Speaks, the central theme is all our relations. And so there's all this elder wisdom all around us. And do we want to dance? It's a dance if we choose. It's both like a circle dance with a group of people, and it's also, it's a one-on-one slow dance or a fast dance. I think it's a very good metaphor. It also takes a little bit of fear out of the exploration process if we approach it a little bit more playfully, and not like, they're gonna destroy my ego and I'm gonna end up in a mental hospital.
Yeah. So book number 6 is Seeking the Heart of Wisdom, The Path of Insight Meditation by Joseph Goldstein and Jack Kornfield, with a foreword by the Dalai Lama.
You asked me about the power of now before. We talked about it briefly. So Vipassana is the practice of the power of now. And the Buddha is the most famous practitioner of the power of now. And so it's a training. It's a training in presence. And I once told a Dharma teacher, I said, you guys have this down to a science, don't you? And so that book is just like boom, 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 boom. And, for a lot of people, and it was certainly a very, very much a part of my formal path, Vipassana is super, super strong medicine. And, it's a beautiful way to go. And those two guys are they don't have the name recognition that Eckhart Tolle does. I mean, very few people do, but they have the. Yeah, this is sort of silly to compare these things, but they have the higher conscious. They share the higher consciousness that he does.
So now with book number 7, we go back to the Jaguar, a talking Jaguar this time. Secrets of the Talking Jaguar by Martin Prechtel, 1998. And you said it was difficult to choose one of Prechtel's books because they're all exceptional. So tell us more. Why this one?
Well, I also said that I consider it the best written book in the 10. And so what I mean by that is it's not that the others weren't great wordsmiths, and it wasn't that they couldn't convey beautiful spiritual information. It's that this guy is a magician poet. I mean, this guy has an ability with language that I don't know if anybody else on the planet quite has it. I mean, there are others. They're just not quite as well known as he is. But every sentence just jumps out at you and brings you into, and here we go again, into remembering our indigenous soul and our embeddedness in the natural world and in this and in the shamanic dimension behind that natural world. So I said that just now in a very, very kind of Western, almost academic way. He says that through poetry. I mean, it's not poetry, classic poetry, but it's poetry. And that book is his initiation as a medicine man, a shaman. And there's a special word in Mayan that I can't remember. But I said to a friend last night when we talked about him after the sweat lodge, I just said, he's the real deal. And my friend said, he can't get over. He said, I couldn't get over like a paragraph without bursting into tears.
Well, you said it's the best because it reads like a combination of wine and chocolate on a torrid summer afternoon. Who could resist? Yeah. Number 8, a book that's close to my heart. Our dear recently departed friend Hank Wesselman, Spiritwalker, Messages from the Future. And it was through Hank that I met you.
You bet. God bless Hank. I feel like I checked in a little bit with Hank before this conversation, and so Spiritwalker is the most fun dystopian work of art you ever want to read, and it makes you it makes me feel okay about what he lays out in Spiritwalker is essentially the inevitable. I think you could say that. I mean, inevitable unless there's some drastic transformation, inevitable collapse of technological civilization going back to the Paleolithic period over the next 5,000 years. I mean, talk about a vision. And he says that was not anything that he concocted other than the fact that he had all this paleontological background. That what an amazing paleontologist he was, but that it was the spirit of Nanoa and the Hawaiian Islands and California that just came through him and literally talked this vision through. And so anyway, just to connect it to the beginning of your question, the book also conveys his vulnerability, his humanity, his beauty, and his passion. And that's what I saw in your interview with him. And it took my breath away. And I don't do this every time I see a good podcast. I wrote to you within 5 minutes of it it being over.
Yeah, because I didn't know that Hank had passed.
Right.
He passed soon after that interview.
That's right.
And that was such a shock to me when you told me about that. Yeah. How can you not be intrigued and drawn to a book, that has a description like 5,000 years into the future, Noah had been sent by his chief on a journey into what used to be America. There's a guy from the future coming back to our time, wanting answers and information. I mean, right there, that hooked me. When I read that description, I had to read the book.
Yeah, it's stunning, and at a minimum, it's a monster wake up call.
Yeah. God bless Hank Wesselman.
God bless Hank.
So, book number 9, slight change here. Slight change of energy. Sexual energy ecstasy. A practical guide to lovemaking secrets of the East and West by David and Ellen Ramsdale, published in 1993. So this one jumped off the shelf and onto your list.
Yeah, it sure did. And I'm so glad it did, because that life wanting life, like life wants life, the creative force, the sexual force, it's all the same force. I mean, it takes different vibratory aspects. It was laid out by the Greeks with philos, agape, and eros. But what we're talking about here is really embracing eros. But the beautiful thing about this book is that they're taking sex out of the second chakra and moving it into the heart and into the higher dimensions. And so, along with psychedelics and meditation, all the things that these ways, if you will, or methods, sexuality is it's kind of right there in front of our face. And one other thing that I thought about you getting to this question is that there's a way in which spirituality is above the waist. I mean, if we think back at zillions of conversations you've had and I've had, it's about from the heart up. But it's like, sorry, that isn't the complete picture. And so we're busting out of the Victorian age. We're busting out of, kind of Catholic orientation to sexuality. So yeah, Wild Earth, Wild Soul means really embracing our erotic nature.
Yeah, because it is natural.
Completely
natural. Yeah. Okay, so the last book on your list, One River by Wade Davis, published in 1996. And you say that no other book has the sweep of One River when it comes to the plight of indigenous peoples, particularly those inhabiting South America.
Yeah, Wade Davis is, I don't know, he's probably about 10 years older than me. And like Hank and like John Perkins, they were kind of my heroes. They were 10 years ahead of me, and I was really, really admiring their work and learning from them. And One River is both a sledgehammer in terms of understanding what's happened to South America over the last 100 years, but it's also, and this is what, if Wade watches this, he would say that our duty as the rest of the world, the non-South Americans, because he also, there's the Andean and the other non-Amazonian tribes who have very, very deep spirituality. He would be saying, well, we should do everything we possibly can to preserve their wisdom and their language and their land. But if we're going to lose it, we need to protect what protect what they have however we can protect it. And I think in his case and my case and John's case, it's not just protecting it as a kind of an intellectual concept, but really embracing it and doing our very best to make it a lifestyle that is authentic to us, to make an earth honoring shamanic lifestyle something that is really authentic and isn't out for the money or whatever, or glamorous, but is really changing the dream, as John says over and over again. It's about, so I think Wade's book, it sort of supplies all the information of like, what is this worldview that is so essential to us preserving? What does it feel like? And so he does it in a more academic way than Martine Prechtel, but both of them are giants in terms of this. What, the my main thing, my main shtick, as we say in Yiddish.
Are you aware of the connection between Wade and one of the authors of your other books? Richard Shorty's?
Oh yeah, he was Wade's a student of Richard.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and Schultes was Wade's hero.
Yes. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I think Shorty's sent two prize students to follow in his footsteps and unveil the botanical secrets of coca, the notorious source of cocaine, a sacred plant known to the Inca as the divine leaf of immortality.
Yes. So many plants, so many teachings, and I think one of the very how would you put it, like kind of obvious, like elephants in the room, is how like you were talking about it before in terms of the plants being you mentioned coca, and I think that that what happened to me as it sort of snorted up my nose is that coca is in its original form, not cocaine, is similar to coffee in that it's very stimulating, but in kind of in a beautiful, you can function just fine. What am I getting at here? Life is magic, Sandy. This planet is magic. It's heaven on earth. We've been given paradise. And so why did I say that? Because what a guy like Wade Davis does, or Schultes, is their and God bless E.O. Wilson, who just passed into the spirit world. They're pointing to this bio and spiritual diversity that is in the whole, built into the universe, for that matter. And we're like, playing with TikTok or Facebook. I mean, I love Facebook, but that's not the point. There's a little more to life than Facebook.
Yeah. So that's your 10 books, but there are 3 that you said you assume our audience knows about them, but you would like to mention them. Tell us what those 3 are and why you want to mention them.
The Tao Te Ching, the Bhagavad Gita, and what was the third one?
And anything by Alan Watts.
All right. I said it before. God is love. That our discussion is in many ways about seeing the deeper reality, that there's so much more going on, and that we're held in the embrace of love if we're willing to go there. and so they're not as schmaltzy as I am, and the three of them, I mean, let's assume that the Bhagavad Gita was probably written by a few people as the Tao Te Ching, but they're classics in pointing out the deeper, higher reality that we know what we're talking about. As Eckhart would say, all these words are just signposts, and it's up to us to kind of feel what that means. But they're those three super eloquent, erudite, and powerful. And I assume that most people that would be listening to you at least know about those books.
Yeah. Yes, and they've all turned up on people's lists.
Good.
more than once. So tell me, what are you reading now?
I'm rereading Touch the Talking Jaguar by Martine Prechtel, because what happened was the book jumped back out, and I said, I this is the one I'm going to reread. And as I was saying to that friend last night, he's in a league by himself in certain ways, and so as I reread, I'm learning again, and just loving his message, and the storytelling is just, you just love it. You just say, how could this be possible that this guy actually lived through these crazy experiences, but somehow he's not. It's not a Castaneda thing. He's not making this up.
Yeah. Now, in your keywords, we always ask our guests to give us a few descriptors of themselves, and using some keywords that really represent what the people close to them see in you. There were a couple you talked about: magic mushroom lover, a mystic, a misfit. You love the M words, hopefully memorable. But you also said magnanimous, as in aspiring to be like magma. Tell me about that.
Love the question. Can you feel that lava coming out of the from the earth through the volcanic mountain, and then coming through the top, and then just cresting over into that fire earth? So when in my best moments, I forgot we were talking about me. In my best moments, that's I love that. I love to be a voice for the earth in that way, so that it's not just a mental game, but to help people feel like we're made of that stuff. We are that stuff, and sometimes we're pretty hot. Speaking of sexual energy, ecstasy, and a torrid summer afternoon, so yeah, like that's what I mean. It's like magma.
And it's very expensive.
Oh, yeah. Expansive,
not expensive.
Right.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about Russia, because Russia has become like a second home to you. You've been there 44 times, assisting the environmental and indigenous movements through Zen. What attracts you to Russia?
Well, this is good for this audience. I mean, first of all, I love it. I love the people. I love the natural world. I love, in the broadest sense, I love all of Russia, and let's say the European Russians and the Siberian Russians. They're just like Native Americans. For now, they're American. They're United Statesers. they just show me something about life that I wouldn't otherwise know. And I feel very strongly that I had a past life in Leningrad. This used to be something I was very private about, but it was so overwhelming when I arrived in Leningrad for the first time in either 85 or 86. I knew I was there. I knew what they had gone through in the siege of Leningrad. I understood what the terror of Stalin and that. And then when I got over to Siberia, I felt the super power of that's where the word shaman comes from central Siberia. And yeah, in during this conversation, I didn't think of Russia once, and then you bring it up, and it's like, oh my God, this is a huge, like it's an avalanche of mystery and abundance that I have been incredibly fortunate to receive. Yeah, I'm going back there with a group the next summer 2022, and I can't wait. You think I would like really a little kooky, I get tired of it and say seen that, done that, but no, I can't wait.
So you said that it opens your eyes to things that you would never get to know about. Can you expand on that a little bit? What kind of things?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind, without insulting anybody, is that the first world European American whatever, it's sort of it's kind of spread all over the place now, but it's a kind of, I mean, including Russia, but I was going to say briefly, the Russians are tough in a good way, and there's a lack of self-absorption or self-centeredness. I mean, it's not that they don't suffer from neuroses too. Of course they do, and I'm going to speak for America. I think that we are so dumbed down in this country in so many ways, meaning that we're just going from Burger King to whatever, like the bar, and to the Bible, to the evangelical Bible, and it's like, come on, we got to go a little deeper, and the Russians are deeper, and so I think that it's there's a lack of superficiality, and from the very beginning, since whatever it was, I got to find out so I don't keep confusing 1985 and 1986, but from the very beginning, incredible amounts of hospitality, but within 10-15 minutes, they're talking about the deep stuff. They're talking about conversations like the different versions about what is this thing, life? What's relationships? What's this nature thing? What about the poets, etc.? And this comes out in all the great Russian literature, and so there's a depth there that I have to find it in the United States, whereas to me, it's everywhere. It's mostly everywhere. I mean, it's not that hasn't changed, Sandy, and I'm being extremely overly general, but as an archetype, there's a lot of depth there.
Well, I understand what you're saying, and as a Brit who's lived in America, for many years, and obviously experienced a lot of America and Americans, I can see what you're saying, and I have wondered: is that because it's more or less a young country? I mean, it's not but it is, because once, the West took over and, the native peoples were pretty much wiped out. It's only 300-400 years history in a sense there, and I wonder whether that has something to do with this depth that you're looking for and that you see in other countries that are much older.
Well, I'm listening. I heard you, and I was saying to myself, I'm really tough on my fellow Americans, and we get to be that way of our own, of our own people, and I love us very much, and you're absolutely right. We are such a young country. We are so young, and I think what we're talking about is immaturity. But God forbid we have to go through another civil war or something catastrophic in order for us to get a deeper sense of history the way most Europeans and most certainly the Russians have. And I think you've touched on the thing that I didn't say, which is that the sense of history. Where is our country in relationship to the rest of the world? And America is not number one. Sorry.
Well, here's the thing. We talked about history earlier. We talked about the power of now and the present and not being caught in the past or the future. So does it really matter? Are we putting too much on this? Does the past really matter? Does it matter that, England has a longer history, recorded history than America? No, I don't think so.
Yeah, but it's not like yes, each moment is fresh, but it's also born from all the now moments that come before it. So I think it would be, how would I say it? Like I get what you're saying, and there's a purity of the enlightened state. But I think there's, like, Eckhart Tolle is a brilliant historian, and is also very, very astute in terms of current events. So I don't think they're
No,
exclusive
totally not.
whatsoever. And I think it actually adds to someone's enlightenment for them to have a historical perspective.
Well, and we mustn't forget that each now moment we're making history.
You
Yeah.
bet, right here
Yeah.
and right now.
Yeah. So let's make one that we want,
Let's
to look
make
back
one.
on. It has been a delight to speak with you, Sky Otter. And I really want to thank you for sharing your 10 best spiritual books with the No BS Spiritual Book Club archive. They're great additions to our archive. And I love that so many of your books are about nature and about plants and about, some of the real natural things that really do matter that we mustn't forget about. Is there anything that you would like to say to our audience in closing?
Well, I guess in a spiritual audience, it can be a little bit cliche, but Terence McKenna, we met in the bathroom after one of his speeches. On the way out of the bathroom, I said to him, Terence, you're just brilliant, and I love what what you say. And I was appreciating his intellectual. I was appreciating his ability to be an intellectual giant. And he looked at me square in the face, like I'm looking at you right now, and he said, Bill, it's all about love. It's all about love. And I think that all those, we're talking about relationships before, and the natural world, it's all like, kind of like, here we are in Earth School. Can we learn? Like, that's what it's all about. And it's a beautiful thing to discover in one's life, and it makes things a hell of a lot easier.
It does indeed. And what a lovely word to close on. Love. World needs a lot more of it. Bill Pfeiffer, Sky Otter, thank you for joining us today. And before we close, you can find everything that you need to know about Bill Pfeiffer, Sky Otter's book, Wild Earth, Wild Soul, a manual for an ecstatic culture, and his core programs, Sacred Journeys and Medicine Sessions at his website, billpfeiffer.org. And if you don't want to miss any live streaming episodes in this weekly series of 10 Best Spiritual Books interviews, you can sign up to save your space and be the first to know who's coming up next and receive last-minute reminders on the video page at the nobsspiritualbookclub.com, and there may even be a link below this video. And while you're on the website, if you know you have a book in you but don't know where to start, click on the Work With Me tab and find out how my experience helping others tell their stories might be the catalyst that you've been longing for. So that brings us to the end of this week's show, which will also be available on all the major podcast platforms within a week. I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, and I'll be back with another episode of the No BS Spiritual Book Club's 10 Best Spiritual Books interview series at the same time next week. Till then, it's goodbye from me.